If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Black 48.
Willing to die for.
Black 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Black
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking about
die for.
tribal self.
Black 48.
I'm talking about those movies, those yet unheard. Peace and power. Once again, this is the Panther 48 podcast. You sitting here with the Trinity. You got myself, Brother Sight, Brother War, and you got Brother E. I'm not going to do the long introduction because by now y'all know who you're talking, who you're dealing with and listening to. Anyway, today we're gonna talk about we're gonna discuss. We're gonna kind of go into some of the mental trauma that Black people have suffered in this country. We've dealt with and we built on, white supremacy and racism, the principles, the weapons that utilized in order to keep people in control. And we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to deal with some of the comments that was left about the white supremacy videos that we dropped. We're going to deal with some of how white supremacy and racism affects some of your stars, your quote unquote heroes, some of the wealthiest Black people in this country. We're going to talk about those subjects and anything else we feel like dialoguing about. So in the beginning, I'm going to start off with this. And I ain't even going to look at it from a negative perspective. I'm going to look at it from the perspective that maybe these people just didn't understand what we was talking about and why we was talking about it, and maybe need a little bit of a history lesson and a little bit of breakdown. So the first person is Rodney Haynes, 3372. The comment that he left, he said, "We already know this," talking about our racism and white supremacy video. And he left a little crying face on there. And they say, "Where is the actions to correct this issue? Enough talking already. Actions. White don't care about you and all these Black people talking what they did to us. Stop it." That's what this guy said. And so then the other guy said, a baller 84 MILW, he said, "Imagine if we took responsibility without blaming white people just once." And he put two clowns, I guess he called them as clowns, for the videos on white supremacy and racism. But that's just my guess. So what do you brothers comments, ideas, commentary on these two statements that we got from these listeners?
First thing I would like to say on that first comment is, I think part of the problem is oftentimes us identifying and working on identifying what we call to be an enemy or a weapon that is being used against us. People tend to not look at it as that and not even look at our mental condition as being one to where we're so traumatized that we don't even see that we're suffering from something. In other words, let me just break that down a little bit. On the surface level, we can say, yeah, we get that. We know we've been through slavery. We know we've been through the mafia. We know we're oppressed as a people. But a lot of times what we're not recognizing is how this is a systematic design that creates an epigenetic response in our system to the point to where we are not able to see how it's a continuation and a continuing of a problem. And by going back and identifying the root element and identifying it, like I say oftentimes on our podcast, because I am talking about elements of solutions, one of those have to be, first and foremost, recognizing that you are on a battlefield, recognizing that we are being targeted, and that targeting that we're dealing with is putting us in a position to where, unless we are able to realize that we are on a battlefield and then start treating it as such, that the conditions will continue to perpetuate themselves to where we are constantly in a mode of fighting one another. So I think part of the thing that he's not seeing is that you have to be able to identify that weapon. You have to be able to identify that something's being used against you in order to know how to go about responding to it. And in addressing that, we do need to go back and talk about what it is that is created these conditions, so that you can also have a blueprint in terms of mapping out how to go about dealing with it. But if you can't identify it, truly identify it, and identify for what it is, as it being a weapon used against you and formed against you, as opposed to thinking it's just a condition that has happened to you, then you can't go any further. So to me, when we talk about trying to say, well, yeah, you're blaming white folks, it's not about a blame at all. We're simply stating where a lot of this has started. And by stating where it started, and by stating the way things are perpetuated, now I'm able to go to the War Council and then start talking about, okay, so how do you get the average person? How do you get a society? How do you get the collective to come together, or realize that it ain't coming together, so that we can start forming a proper bond to deal with this? So first, you have to start really seeing the psychological effects that's happening, and that are creating the conditions that prevent us from working together, create the conditions that cause us to not want to unify, or be scatterbrained, or to be traumatized into just what I call petrified behavior that don't make you do anything progressive. They don't make you do anything to correct the situation. But you have to start identifying these. So even though we may be talking about some of the same subject matter that people often hit on from time to time, we're still coming from a different angle. And an angle we're coming from is identifying these battlefield conditions, and identifying it as being such to where we are now able to see at least be able to form a better picture, to be able to move towards solution building. So we're talking about solutions, but you got to keep in mind also, this is another thing people got to understand. What sense would it make to lay out every single aspect of your strategy and your tactical approach on social media in the first place? But we can promote identifying what these weapons are that are being used against us, in order to get people to wake up to the reality of that situation. Wake up to the fact that as long as we are running into things and looking at things from the individual and stuck in identity politics, then we will continue to be used as a weapon against our own selves. So I'm gonna start with that. And then
to address, like you just said, the first comment from the Rodney Haynes guy, he said, we already know this. Evidently, I don't think the brother may not be a consistent viewer of ours, because before we did this, we did videos dealing with the proper handling of a revolution. And we was building on and breaking down an old essay that Huey P. Newton wrote, explaining the duties and the responsibilities of a revolutionary. And he said that the primary duty of a revolutionary is to raise the consciousnness of the people. A lot of times people think that the primary goal of a revolutionary, I remember when I was incarcerated, when I was on vacation, as Brother E liked to call it, I remember a dude told me this, which was ironic to me, because I have a very militant spirit, but in having that very militant spirit, I also know how to be humble. Like I explained the difference between a guerrilla and a gorilla. People expect a gorilla to act like a gorilla because they don't understand the differences in the word. And the brother told me, he said he expected me to be loud and aggressive. And the way I usually deal with problems down there in that situation is through paperwork. I learned how to utilize their system, their legal system, and the rules that the institution was governed by against those who was attempting to govern us. Again, it's something that you learn from the Panther Party. I remember one of the first things that we was introduced to was the Texas Penal Code, and we used that as a weapon just as much as any gun. We used that. We utilized that as a weapon. And so I started utilizing that as a weapon down there in that institution. And the brothers, the weapon was effective, but there were some brothers that thought that me being a revolutionary and being active in the Panther Party in the world, they expected my weapons to be violence. They didn't expect my weapons to be words. They didn't understand how powerful words were and how they can get the message across that we needed to get across. That we might be incarcerated, but we're not going to accept oppression. And we're going to use your own words against you to make sure that you don't think that you have the right to oppress us. I said all that to say this, that one of the things that the brother needs to understand is that the goal of any true revolutionary is to raise the consciousness of the people. If you are a revolutionary and a teacher or a scholar on Black issues, then yes, you may personally know this. But then it's another thing that Brother E said, Brother E constantly talked about, that in the last video that we dropped. It should be dropped before this one will be, is he constantly talked about the concept of being individual and the not being able to see the whole. You personally might know this, but the people as a whole do not know this information. And so we're going to reiterate this information, and maybe 10 months down the line, we may have to do it all over again, because one of the things we got to realize is that while our situation is not new, there are constantly new people, new bodies, new human beings being born into the Black community that don't know this information. So until our people have a deeper understanding of this information, we'll have to talk about this. And he said enough talking will never stop. The only way you raise the conscience of the people is through the word. It's the word that does that. It's the word being taught to people, either through books, the reading of the word, through speeches, the speaking of the word, but it's the word that enlightens the mind and raises the consciousness and moves you to a higher level of understanding. And then with that proper level of understanding, you're able to make the right actions. If you try to act without having a proper ideology behind your action, then your action is going to be improper. And I think that needs to be truly understood. Stokely Carmichael said something similar to what Huey said in a different way. Stokely said that a lot of people think that the primary goal of a revolutionary is to destroy the system. The primary goal of the revolutionary is not to destroy the system. The primary goal of the revolutionary is to raise the conscience of the people and gain freedom. The only thing is, two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Oppression and freedom cannot occupy the same space at the same time. So if the revolutionary attempts to bring freedom, then the oppressor is going to necessarily bring about oppression. So the primary goal of the revolutionary is not to destroy the system, it's to bring about freedom. A consequence of the revolutionary's primary goal is the destruction of the system, because those two things cannot occupy the same place at the same time. So we have to talk about these subjects. We have to teach this information. We have to blueprint this. And I'm gonna say this before getting off this subject, before getting off this brother's comment and moving to the next one. In the Art of War, to kind of back off what War just said, in the Art of War by Sun Tzu, and I'm gonna paraphrase because I can't remember the quote verbatim, but Sun Tzu essentially said that he said that to win all through fighting is not the acme of skill. Just like it's not the acme of skill of eyesight to be able to recognize the sun. It's not the acme of hearing to be able to recognize the clanging gong. I mean, that's nothing. Anybody can do that. He said the acme of all war skill is to win all without fighting. And the only way to do that is through proper strategy. Then he said the best strategy is not to eliminate an enemy on the battlefield. He said the best strategy is to eliminate your enemy while he's still in his mother's womb. You understand that? You got to think about what they're saying. And that's why we went into white supremacy and racism. We understand that white supremacy and racism as a system was devised based on that understanding of strategy and tactics. Sun Tzu said the acme of skill is to eliminate the enemy not on the battlefield, but eliminate him while he's still in his mother's womb. And if you create a system, the only way to do that is to create a system that is through automatic, systematic, remote control, operating at all times at no limited amount of time, even without the victims of that system recognizing it. And that's why we did those shows on white supremacy and racism, so that the people can understand the principles of it and understand that those principles, that system is actually affecting you in every area of human activity. That's what the brother Rodney Haynes need to understand. E, do you have anything to say on that comment before we move to the next one?
Well, y'all being polite and nice and shit, fuck that. That comment for me is exactly why we have to continue doing these shows, because everybody and their mama, from the dinglings that got duped by a couple of lesbians getting money from cats like George Soros and other benefactors into joining the BLM and going out in the street and yelling and screaming and not getting shit done. All of them knew what the problem was. All of them understood racism, white supremacy. Ain't none of them read a book about it. Ain't none of them studied the situation. But everybody knows what it is. Everybody, the word learning stops with the words I know. So if you know, tune out. Go someplace else. Start a militia. Do something that you're supposed to be doing in life. What have you done? We put our time in the streets. This is what we've learned. At the very least, we studied the situation at the time to gain an understanding of it. And now in hindsight, this is where we fucked up. This is what we better need to understand. But as long as people want to sit back and say, we know all of this, y'all, yeah, blah, 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 and all of that shit, well, cool. If you know all of it, come on the show and teach us. We need to know some shit. Especially if you say, we know all of it. Who the hell is we? We don't know shit, because if we knew shit, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. Duh, dumb motherfucker. My bad. I ain't mean to call nobody no names, but that's some silly shit that I've had to hear the entire, 25, 30 years I've been doing this shit. We already know that. Well, goddamn it, get out of my face and go do something. Get in the street. You ain't got time for YouTube and shit. I know War got to sit by time and struggle to sit down and do this show because War's constantly in the fucking street. If you got time to post silly comments about what you already know, then you obviously not too busy in the streets. So how about you get in the street and do some work? If you know it already, don't even watch. Just go on and do it. Bust us up out this situation, and I'll be your number one follower. That's all I got to say.
All right. And I don't think it could have been said any better. The next comment was Baller84. He said, imagine if we took responsibility without blaming white people just once. Clowns. That's what he hit us with. War.
Well, I would say this.
I prefer Joker.
To me, it really just builds off of what he just said. The thing is this is someone that sounds like they're not really listening to what we're saying. They're stuck on maybe what the subject matter is, and they hear the word white folks, this, that, and then that becomes a trigger point for them. See, what we have to do from a psychological standpoint is we have to recognize our triggers, because it is these triggers that create situations to where we throw our guard up and we stop listening and we stop learning from something. And I think what happened in a scenario like that is a trigger was reached. And at that point, this person was not able to actually digest the actual message that was being thrown out there. That also leads me to be able to say this in regards to realizing again what we're dealing with. I like to get into it in as calling it the three selves. The three selves being self-preservation, self-sufficiency, and self-determination. When we talk about the three elements or the three parts of the self, as a people, when we don't look at what creates the disruption of this trifecta of the three elements or the three parts of the self, when we don't look at what disrupts that natural cycle, which is how we generate and operate through a position of power, then we as a collective people, and mind you, this is another thing that I would even say that is not being registered with some individuals, is that what we're doing is we're trying to talk us into collective, into unification as a people. We as a people are suffering from the fact that, because going back to what he emphasizes all the time when you talk about enslavement, what the physical enslavement and the mental enslavement that we deal with, it has caused us to go into when you talk about self-preservation at that moment, it causes us to go into a survival mode. That survival mode has been a mental condition that we have been dealing with, and it as a response to that, we have been operating from a position of victimization as a collective people, to the point to where we have started wearing our victimization on our chest and being proud of the fact that we continually endure the process of oppression, but not actually looking at the fact that these things have caused us to dismantle the aspects of what makes a complete human being. which again goes to the position of self-preservation, self-sufficiency, and self-determination. These things have been stripped from our natural psyche. And so therefore, we don't operate from a natural position of recognizing liberation and recognizing freedom. We operate through a codependency as a people. We are operating through a aspect of being domesticated as a people. And through that domestication, all that we tend to do at that point is have reactionary responses or reactionary ways to deal with things, which again is a self-preservation aspect that causes us to go into coping. And so when we deal with these coping mechanisms, is which I would call that, we're not seeing that the ethnic and cultural oppression is in constant motion in terms of being recodified and redefined every step of the way. We're not seeing how social media continues to play upon our trauma by overexposing us to the anything that can create a distraction that causes us to not want to actually unify collectively. And so these things have to be called out for what they are. Again, like what Syke just said, if somebody knows this, and what he was saying being hey, we'll follow you if you know where you're going. We're talking about a collective movement, not an individual, but a collective movement. We're trying to get the collective mind, which goes back to saying raising the consciousness of the people to realize the damage that has been done, that has created a disbursement of our ability to be able to connect and come together, which is how we would actually deal with self-determination. Because when we talk about self-determination, when you deal with it, you got to deal with it as an individual, a family, and a collective. As it applies to that self-determination factor, the individual, especially within a Black community, we have allowed exploitation to be able to downgrade us to a point where we don't know how to survive and don't even understand the elements of barter system, don't even understand the elements of being able to exchange and utilize the resources within our own social groups and our own communities to get around the exploitation. So therefore, we have been enabled to be able to deal with and address natural concepts of resources within our community. And as a result of that, that has caused us to limit our ability to recognize what it means to have collective power. And because we don't recognize and understand without even going into understanding what it means to have power, collective power, or even individual power, we don't utilize it. We come at it from a reactionary standpoint. And so when we don't know what our power base is, then these are the things that happen. And I would just end that by saying, as a base of power, know your power. So that is the first step, is to know your power. And when people don't know their power, don't know their worth, don't know their abilities, then you're not going to be able to come up with utilizing a strength and continue to operate. And then we will continue to operate from a position of reactionary, because we don't know what it means to have and operate in a position of empowerment. We look at the oppressive ways that the elites have done this, and we think that that is the only form of true power. And we have to realize that in order to actually operate and utilize the power that we have to see where it has been dismantled and how it has been dismantled and how it has played psychological damage to prevent us from being able to unify and come together. So all of these different ways that have created these dissections and these variables that cause us to go all in our own individual directions and get into identity politics and identity movements, these things continue to stray us away from even having the mentality and the mindset for solution-based approaches. We have answers, but we don't have solutions. And the reason why we don't even see the concept of solutions go into the cognitive damage that has been done to us. And social media plays a big role on that. And so as we start diving in this today, we're gonna talk more on that. That's it.
And I want to add on to that from this perspective. One of the things that like the other guy said, that we all know this. One of the things that I think that one of the first things that I think that you learn when you get into the studying of Black consciousness is that this system was so it was good. It was wickedly wise. It was devious. You know, and when you understand that, one of the things that it did, as War said, when they heard the word white people, a white person, they was triggered. And that's a program that happened to us. You know, we was trained. Malcolm said that we're so conditioned that when the master say that he's sick, we would say, "We sick, boss." When the master talks about his house, we'd say, "We house, boss." He would fight harder than the master to put the house out, put the fire out if his house was on fire. And we, even though we don't recognize, even though we don't see it, even though we don't see it, this white thinking is in our minds. It's there. And it's the symbolism that you see in the movie of the Matrix. Anybody that has not disconnected themselves from the system, from the Matrix, is potentially an agent. And when you heard that word white, when you see the regular person turn into an agent, that's that trigger. They heard it and they was triggered to, man, we gotta let white people off the hook. For once, can we just stop blaming white folks and take responsibility ourselves? You know, and it's crazy when you think about that, you know, because we wasn't blaming white folks. One thing about me, I would definitely say this. I believe in taking responsibility for every action that happens to me. If I walk outside right now and I get rained on, it's my fault I got rained on, because I didn't take an umbrella. I didn't look at the weather. By placing the responsibility on myself, then I give myself the power to change my situation. That does not mean that you have to be a damn fool and not see when an enemy is operating against you. You have to be able to see and recognize when the enemy is operating against you in order to come up with a proper strategy for dealing with that enemy. And as we've said this before, that this is not about attacking an individual white people. As E have expressed many times on the show, E's mother is white. And E loves his mother. I love E's mother. War love E's mother. E's mother is not the problem. E's mother is an individual. We're talking about a system. We're discussing, when we say white folks, we're not talking about individual white people. We're talking about a white system that many individual white people benefit from.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? I was... Look again. Freeze it.
This isn't the Matrix.
No. It's another training program designed to teach you one thing. If you are not one of us, you are one of them.
That's what we're talking about. So for those who feel the need to come and defend white people as a whole, you might need to look deep into your own psyche and ask yourself, what's going on here? Why do I feel the need to defend white people so much? And do you put the same amount of energy into defending black people? Do you? Because 9 times out of 10 you don't. Most black people that feel the need to defend white people don't defend black people. In the same, in one breath they'll say, stop blaming white people, and then turn around and talk about how horrible black people are. So it's the conditioning, it's the training. That's one thing that I think that we need to understand. E, you got anything on that?
That is so sweet that you love my mama. I'm texting her right now, letting her know, because you know she in the hospital and all of that. I'm gonna let her know. Syke said he love her. That is so sweet. She gonna appreciate that, bro. You know, if you've ever listened and see, this is these are not critical thinking people, obviously, because like you said, that y'all call it what is it, triggers? I call it clutching the pearl moment. If you stuck clutching your pearls, oh, he said white people, the fuck out of here with that shit. If you stuck at that moment and you can't get beyond it, then it's obvious you've never listened to Farrakhan speaking to white people or speaking in public, say on Donahue or online somewhere or whatever, doing an interview for 60 minutes, and then going and listening to the way he talks when it's just us in the room. The conversations we have here are not necessarily, though I don't personally on an emotional level have a problem. But the reality of it is, generally speaking, that's family business. That shit we discuss behind closed doors where we get in each other's asses and tell each other where we are fucking up. Black folk messing up this, black folk messing up that. When we come out and present ourselves to YouTube and the rest of the freaking world, I'm not gonna sit up here and denigrate our people outside of real shit when we go into this issue. It's just not. There's an enemy that has to be dealt with. Anytime there is a reference to what's going on in our minds, it is pointed at, it is intended to attack that white that's in your mind.
What are they?
Sentient programs. They can move in and out of any software still hardwired to their system. That means that anyone we haven't unplugged is potentially an agent.
Because the reality of it is, everything you do is controlled and manipulated by them. But the fact that you can't see even your comments defending white folks and telling us not to attack white people, that you can't see how white that is a part of the problem. And that's what this conversation is about. In order to, the first rule of learning is know thyself. In the situation that we're in, that just so happens to mean you have to know the enemy because we are not ourselves. We're far removed from ourselves. We only can think back at most, and I'm talking about those who haven't sat down and studied the issue, at most we can say, oh yeah, slavery. That's it. There is no more history for black folk. For black folk. It's not until we get to outside of that mindset and go back to what we were doing before we had to deal with white people that we begin to see who it is we really are, and then can begin to see where it is we are now as opposed to where we were then, and figure out what has gone wrong. We don't have any concept, the music that we listen to, the more we strip, the more sisters strip, more they show their body, the better they do. That's racism, white supremacy. Lil brother talking about bitches and hoes, that's racism, white supremacy. Cats wearing how fucked up their neighborhoods are as a badge of honor. You've heard it up and down the street. I'm come from such and such and such. It's hard over there. We shoot up, rock, rock, rock. That's not something to be proud of, dumbass. So the fact that we compete in the show of denigrating ourselves and putting each other down as a way to show success, that somehow that's something to be proud of. Racism, white supremacy. We don't understand. You say you know all of this and you want to call somebody a clown. I guess that's what that meant. I don't know. I'm not really into the little emoji things and all. That's just silly, childish nonsense. Say something, say something. But the fact is, if you understood the role of not a clown, but a joker, is the purpose of the joker to disrupt the situation? Is the purpose of the joker to cause confusion to those who are standing around listening and watching? Yes, providing some level of entertainment and ha ha ha, but at the bottom of it, at the base of it, if you've ever watched the movies, that Joker movie was a very good breakdown of how people actually break down in society. But that one probably, if somebody leaves a comment like those comments I've seen, they probably didn't make it through that movie like they would make it through a regular Marvel movie, the ones with the white boys and spandex and shit, because it wasn't as interesting as those types of movies, So there's this idea that we're still not thinkers is a part of the problem. We're still not assessing and reasoning and watching. We're still absorbed in it, manipulated by it, controlled by it, and we don't even know. And that's what the conversation is about. You don't know how manipulated you are. Every day of your life, you are manipulated, and it's messed up that you not realizing it and fighting back against it is a part of the manipulation. You can't see the problem because the problem exists. It's trippy. It's really, really trippy. People cannot perceive of what is going on in their minds because what is going on in their minds has put their ego at such a high level that everybody says they know it. Everybody says black people need to do this, yet them being black does not require them to do what it is they just said black people need to do, as if we're detached. So this whole we know what racism, white supremacy, and all that is. Again, it's just some more nonsense that we've been hearing for the past 25, 30 years, but still these same cats that say they know what it is are the same ones that are in pursuit of the next material, the new iPhone or the new pair of Nikes or whatever shoe it is these days, or all of that nonsense. What is that? It's some old racism, white supremacy type shit.
and on that note, since the guy said that we already know this, those listening, in the comments, can you give us a definition of racism and white supremacy? Okay, so another comment that we got, we have a guy saying, and his wasn't a negative, I think he just wanted some information. He's saying, I'm waiting for the Israel episode and how Christian evangelicals have been duped into believing Jews are white. So can somebody tell me about this, about the situation with Israel? And while we're not going to do an episode, at least not right now, I think we can kind of touch on it a little bit and tie it into the subject matter that we're talking about. Can anybody give us an understanding of what this brother or sister, I can't really tell, they say BB Wahoo is talking about? I'm waiting for the Israel episode and how Christian evangelicals have been duped into believing Jews are white.
Well, I think that just kind of speaks on the fact that one of the weapons that we realize is out there is that when you have conquered a people, you assimilate and assume their identities. And all we're talking about is the fact that when it goes back to peoples in positions of power, or people of power, or our true religious and doctrines and operations as a people have been restructured and redefined and redeveloped for everything that was great originates as a white thing now. And that's just a weapon of war. And that it constantly has happened and continues to happen to where that's how you dominate and control the people, is that you get them to basically worship your God, worship anything that has to do with a reflection of an image of anything but who they are. And as long as you can get a people to bow down and bow down to a situation where whatever you put before them is not them. And when I look in the mirror and that reflection I see is not the same reflection of my spiritual essence and my spiritual being, then that is one of the three parts of a defeat that you created. Where you talk about physical, psychological, and spiritual. So creating a spiritual defeat first and foremost by getting us to accept a Godhead figure as not being our own, or even now when we talk about Jew, we're talking about a quote unquote righteous people or the chosen people, so to speak. So when we talk about a quote unquote chosen people that are not black, that don't look like you, that are not African centered, African origin, then basically anything other than them is what it kind of goes into the whole thing of Semite. It's either this or that. That's that binary concept that from a warfare standpoint that I talk about, to where either it is this side or that side. And by getting us as a people to not be able to identify ourselves as being in a position as a people of righteousness, position as a people of those that are chosen, then automatically I defeated you spiritually. Now, once I've defeated you spiritually, then I can start seeping that into my way of life, in terms of everything that you do is going to always place you below me, because as a people, you are sub to me. So anything that I do to give you the ability to be able to operate and exist within a realm of my presence, you should be thankful for. And that's how the whole turning of the other cheek gets manipulated, to where we look forward to this quote unquote position of afterlife, which now from a psychological standpoint, you defeat a people to where they don't feel like they should be in a position of control here and now. You've relegated them to being able to accept something after the fact, after death. So then they're not concerned with the ways of this world in terms of how it's operating now. And to me, that goes into what I call repression, depression, which is operating in a denial that we are perpetuating dysfunctional behavior, because that's what it is. We're in denial that we are perpetuating this dysfunctional behavior. And knowing that we have poor diets, whether it be physical, psychological, or spiritual, these are the things that are happening. Our poor diets are intentional deployments meant to stunt our growth of kinetic direct action as a way of life. And so as a people, we don't seem to realize that these things are intentional. And when they're intentionally deployed in terms of creating weak diets, and that we take on these diets, it's kind of like the concept of soul food. When people have gravitated and held that definition as to mean things like what is it, chitlins and hog maw and all of the kind of things that are negative in terms of what you eat and put in your body. The same thing goes into our mental diet and our spiritual diet. We have taken on and we hold dear this concept of these poor diets. And as long as we allowed ourselves to do that, then it's a perpetuating dysfunctional behavior that is self-defining. And that's where we find ourselves. So we're recognizing that our collective system has been altered to the point of being a dormant function. We have to reactivate the activation of our natural immune response, because as a people, as an individual, family, and collective, it should be natural that we have the ability to defend and ward off anything that is oppressing us as a people. But since we don't operate on a collective level, since we look at quote unquote Jews as being anything other than what we are as a people, and I'm just simply saying that from the standpoint of the quote unquote concept of being the chosen ones. When I don't accept myself as being chosen or in a position of power naturally, then I buy into the fact that I should be slave. I buy into the fact that I should be subservient to another human being or another human quote unquote type. And that right there in itself is just a deplorable weapon meant to put you in a position of inferiority. Once I have you in that position of acceptance of inferiority, then I can just start mustering in and just seeping everything else in to keep you on that negative diet.
I think it's just a matter of the process of them becoming white is the same process of how the cats that built the pyramids became anything but African. You know, it's the same whitewashing process. Look up the Council of Jamnia, the Council of Nicaea. You know, it was just a process over time, and that's what, you know, people do, or countries, nations, whatever do when they conquer a people. You know, they blow the noses off of the Haramakhet or the Sphinx, and they obscure the history and the importance and the significance of the people that are being conquered. You know, that's that whole idea of what is it? The hunter writes the story. Like what has it go? The lion, when the hunter kills the lion, it's the hunter that gets to tell the story about it. You know what I'm saying? I forget that parable, but
that's pretty much it.
But it's just, we were conquered. Of course, they're going to make it look like them so they can claim the history and the greatness of it and take it away from us. You know, I'm not going to try to go into the details. Like I said, those are two areas to look up. But understanding the process of racism, white supremacy, understand that that's just an example. Just the way the pyramids, who were built and Kemet, so-called Egypt in general, that there's any question of the ethnicity or the race of anybody that comes out of Kemet that they decide to make a movie about or whatever. The fact that you have to have that conversation is racism, white supremacy. It's an example of it, you know, and understanding the examples, you start to see how the process is all the fucking same. It's all the same process. They break down the history, hide it from you, take it over, and then give it back to you. It's not rocket science. You know, they took it, changed it, gave it back to us so that we would mind, so that slaves would mind thy master, so that we would behave and act accordingly. And you can apply that to most any situation that we have. They've covered up. So again, I don't know that we would necessarily go in, because there are plenty of videos out there where that shit is broken down. The particulars of that specific part of the war, so to speak. But again, it's all the same process. It just looks different and sounds different. It looks different to those on the outside or those who haven't studied it, because we keep seeing everything disjointed and separated. And that's a part of racism, white supremacy. We don't understand that all these things play in together. Religion is economics. Economics is war. War is religion, is sex, is education. All of these things feed directly into one another. The reason how the evangelicals came to see whoever as white is the same process that has sisters seeing themselves as boss bitches and brothers seeing themselves as niggas. It's the same fucking process. You've taken away who it is we are, told us this other bullshit about who it is we are. We've accepted it, sucked it up, and because of our love and adoration for the oppressor and our hatred for our own selves, we've come to accept that and can do, the nonsensical things that we do, whether in the church or outside of the church. It's all the same process.
I don't know if y'all gonna have a comment on this one, but I'm gonna read it just out of respect, because it's from David Foreman. And David said his comment on the racism white supremacy video was this. He said, we need to add another principle, which is delusion. White supremacy has us believing that we have communities. All communities that we build have been destroyed or isolated. Here in the USA, as well as in Africa, we reside in and around cities that we did not build. In Africa, we reside in countries that we did not create. If we did not build it, then it is not ours. When we wake up and start building again, 90% of our problems will stop.
War? I concur. We don't build, and these aren't ours. They're not even communities, just on the definition of the word. The root of the word community is unity. We don't have that. So there's neighborhoods, it's hoods, it's ghettos, but it ain't no community because there is no unity. And again, that goes back to being individuals. You can't unify individuals. If we can't see a common unity, we're not going to be a community. The only common unity that we can see is that of an individual. We're all united through the fact that we don't believe that we're united. That is some crazy, twisted, fucked up shit. It's really weird. And I have to reassess it constantly because it is so it's off the wall. And we believe that wholeheartedly and completely, and yeah, I absolutely would agree with David. In fact, we don't understand the word like nation. The United States is not a nation. The word nation is related to NATO, is related to the bloodline. A nation is a group of people who are related to one another in some far off, not necessarily straight brothers and sisters and cousins, but the nation has a history that they can draw themselves to or connect themselves to that extends back beyond their reality. This is a country made up of a bunch of people coming from all different types of nations all over the place who are connected, which is one of the issues. It was an issue for Rome when Rome got really, really big. And they used to say the sun never sets on the Roman Empire because it spread basically around the world. It was everywhere. It wasn't, but it was really, really big. One of the issues they had is that when you conquer a people who have a greater alliance or affinity connection to the group that's being connected than you do or that's being conquered, it has a stronger connection to that than they do to the occupying force. In other words, Israel or whoever goes in and tries to occupy the Gaza Strip, those people in the Gaza Strip are more connected and loyal to Palestine than they are Israel. If those Palestinians come here or anybody else from other countries come here, they will wave their flags before they wave the U.S. flag. They don't want to go to war for this country. They don't want to prop up this country and see this country da-da-da-da-da-da. They have a greater affiliation for those countries where they came from, those nations where they came from. And that just makes sense. We're the only ones that don't do that. We're the only ones who will sit up and say, and even if it got this shit laid out by Jesus Christ himself, the evangelicals get laid out by Jesus Christ himself and say, look, every time you buy an iPhone, you are murdering Africans in the Congo. You're contributing to the underdevelopment of the entire continent, your people, who you are. We still don't give a damn because we have no connection to that. We don't see ourselves as a part of that nation and not country. Nigeria is a country. You know, Kenya's a country. These were places that were artificially set up by Europeans, racism, white supremacy. White people cut that shit up like that. In fact, I think one of the borders in Nigeria divides Yoruba land, which was more or less the Yoruba nation. So this artificial boundary cuts right through their homeland, where they identify as having come from. And so and again, racism, white supremacy. They're not ours because they're not based on us. We didn't do it. We didn't do none of this shit other than allowing it to take place. We are the perpetual victims in this shit, and what it is we're being victimized with prevents us from understanding that we're really not the victims. So we continue to play the victim without even realizing that we're playing the victim. Every time we get a government subsidy, you're a victim. Every time you go to them and get a job, you're a victim. Every time you do anything that appeals to them, the whole civil rights movement was about, Dr. King and them, step on some toes, don't give a shit. Dr. King and them were the biggest victims in the history of our people. Why? Because they were going to white folks and asking them to free us, as if, number one, they're capable of freeing us, and number two, they have a desire to free us. That's a victim mentality. And that's one of the biggest issues we face. We are victims. We don't even realize. When we talk about I'm a boss bitch handling my business, you're a victim. You think that means something. You're looking for a man and can't figure out why you can't find a man because you don't even understand what the fuck a man is. Why? Because your father wasn't in the home, because Papa was a Rolling Stone running around making babies or whatnot. That comes directly from the enslaved, so-called slave days, when they used to shop brothers around to have babies at different plantations. So you got all these babies, all these baby mamas, and no daddy with them anywhere. That happened hundreds of years ago, but it's still manifesting itself right now today. We don't understand it, so we're victims. And until we realize our victimization, we can't overcome it. It's like a sister being move beyond those triggers until she recognizes those triggers, and then until she digs into the emotions and why they're triggers for her. We refuse to do that, and so those triggers stay in place and we don't even realize it. Somebody says, white people this, and we're triggered. We don't even realize it, in part because it's the norm. You got the masses of the people who will be right along with some of those comments that you read, Sype, talking about basically quit blaming white people. Those are the victims who are going to stay victims because they can't even see it. These are the cats who are going to vote either for a dude who used to take showers with his daughter until she was 12 years old. This is what he and she have said. I'm not making this up. This is what he and she have said. He used to take showers with his 12-year-old daughter and has been accused of, sexual harassment multiple times. Option one. Or you got another dude and I know black people are in love with Trump now, but we are loving the same fucking game, the same victimization. It's the same dude who, thinks it's appropriate to say some of the things. Look at my African American over there. You don't even realize how racist that is, how much a part of the system. He was in a speech, giving a speech, and he said, oh, look at our African American over there.
Look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so we have an African American guy at one of the rallies a month ago, and he's sitting there behaving.
Toulouse, you're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed.
And made this
as if he owns us. We showed up as his token at his party, and he calls us out for being his African American. And we can't see that this is the same fucking game all over again. Another generation choosing between this bullshit and that bullshit. It's the same shit. So yeah, I mean, how they got white racism, white supremacy. You want details? You got to Google that shit or email somebody and get some specifics on books that you can check out, which is, it's a good question, good topic to have a conversation about. Get a lot out of it if you really want to. But yeah, short answer, racism, white supremacy 101.
And to add to that goes into what I just said about that Sun Tzu said in Art of War, where he talks about you have to eliminate the enemy even when he's in his mother's womb. The only way to eliminate the enemy in his mother's womb is through a system. A system does that. It is a system that perpetuates that consistent oppression. If you got a man steady trying to put his foot physically on your neck, you can see that boot coming down, and it makes you want to get out of the way. It makes you want to fight. But when a system is in place and it tricks you to put your own boot on your own neck, you cannot see that somebody is doing something to you. He just talked about the phenomenon of us no longer having a family. You know, a man, a woman meet each other, start having children together, and build and organize a family, which is the society's first organization. That has been eliminated from the black experience. What has been integrated into the black experience is a man meets a woman, has a kid with her, jumps to the next woman, have a kid with her, jumps to the next woman, have a kid with her. That comes from slavery. That was a plantation practice of constantly creating new property. And we're still doing it and don't know why we're doing it. Dudes are running around here starting at 16, 17 years old, dropping babies that they don't have a plan for. And one thing about that baby, these babies that they're dropping at 16 years old, that they have no plan for, the plan has already been designed by the society that this baby, that this 16-year-old had, will be the new gangbanger, will be the new whore in the streets. This everything, if you look around in society, is working against us. I just seen recently an old clip of Ice Cube. It was Ice Cube and it was I want to say it was Crazy Bone from Bone Thugs and Harmony. Both saying the same thing. It wasn't even the same clip. They wasn't on the same show. They wasn't in the same interview. These was two separate interviews.
Okay, let's take rap music.
Let's take it.
Same people who own the labels own the prisons. So
literally the same people?
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons. So, you know, it seems really kind of suspicious, if you want to say that word, that, you know, the records that come out are really geared to push people towards that prison industry.
But they both were saying the same thing.
It quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement.
Damn.
He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. Then he says, I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who receive funding from the government based on the number of inmates.
Mm-hmm.
The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons.
Mm-hmm.
It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remain filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice.
And they was essentially saying that rap was utilized to help oppress the minds of the people. Q was essentially saying in this video, he said that you got to understand that the same people that controls and owns the record labels are the exact same people that control and own private prisons. He said, and the interviewer said the exact same people. Q said the exact same people. Q said that these people was pushing a narrative in music that would automatically make people commit activities that would send them to prison. So the music made them money, and the music was teaching the people how to send themselves to prison, and them going to prison made them money. And the interviewer said, well, these people that own the record label, they didn't make y'all write these raps. They didn't make y'all make these songs. And Cube said, basically, actually they did, because it was the only way you could get the money. And one of the things you got to understand that when you're in a capitalist society, the appeal of money is extremely powerful. The appeal of money can solve almost all your problems, all your issues, all the stresses and all the worries that you have. But the number one cause of divorces in this society is money issues. So it can even make your relationship go better.
Money's in control of our destiny. We ain't all get a 36 weeks. Money's a recipe. Yeah, ain't number dead president.
If you got enough money. So that is the push that people don't seem to understand. That's why he keeps saying racism, white supremacy. Racism, white supremacy, because people don't understand how all these things tie into each other. We don't understand this. That's how you kill an enemy in his mother's womb, through a system. And the system is operating at every level, on every area of human activity. The system is operating, and we don't seem to understand that. We don't get that. We think we have evaded the system. And again, I use the matrix, the symbolism in the matrix. No matter where they was at in the matrix, no matter where they was at, anybody that was still plugged into the matrix, agent could utilize their body, could come in at that moment and start operating against those who were trying to free people from the matrix. Even the very people they was trying to free was still a conduit of the agents, because they were still plugged into the system. The system is the thing that eliminates the enemy in his mother's womb. This ain't no fake stuff we done made up. This was written in the, like I said, this was written in the Art of War a little over 1,000 years ago by a great war strategist, Sun Tzu. Read some of these books and read and start to understand the concept of strategy and how this stuff works. And this is why we constantly come back to this and have these subjects and have these conversations. Go ahead.
Also, something that we have to understand, that this is a long-term game. This is a long-term process. You know, every other people right now are for the most part, are invested in a long-term strategy, on a long-term forecast for who it is they are and where they're going, guided by their culture. Before all of this went down, so if you've ever noticed, now how do I want to say this? We are in a state of mind that if we don't get immediate gratification, we don't want nothing to do with it. It's racism, white supremacy. You don't build pyramids. You don't have little bitty African folks, the Dogon, the Igbo, I think it was the Igbo, who are able to
about the Twa.
The Twa, that's it. The Twa, my bad. The Twa who mapped out the course of a star for thousands of years, projected its course into the future, you know, of these particular stars, and was so accurate that NASA still uses it to this day, uses their predictions and their mapping out of the future. You have to be able to sit still for a long time to map out the orbit of celestial bodies, of stars and all of those types of things. But we can't do that now because we're constantly moving, constantly have to do this, constantly have to do that. And that's a result, again, of having somebody else's culture dictate what it is we do and how it is we act. We are no longer able to sit still and think. You know, the more you move around, really, the less it is you're thinking. When you sit and you go into yourself and you begin to actually have these concepts. Matter of fact, Psych, we did a show not too long ago where you broke down the word muse. You remember that?
Yes.
Can you tell me the definition real quick of muse again?
Essentially, it's an inspiration. It coming from the Greek goddesses that were called muses, that basically inspired the arts and the sciences. So it's essentially, muse is to inspire.
Now, you ever been to Six Flags?
Yes.
Are you aware of Six Flags and that type of stuff? And Six Flags and SeaWorld and Busch Gardens and all of these things, collectively, we might call them theme parks or amusement parks. What would be the breakdown of the word amused? You know, a means to be away or without.
Yeah.
Muse means exactly what you just broke down. So these types of things, when we're being amused, we're being amused. We're being kept away from those thoughts of science, from those thoughts of art, from those thoughts, period. So this is you know, another one of their tactics, whether it's intentional or it's just a side effect. It works the same. We are amused by the music. We are amused by the dance and the clothes and the pretty little gadgets. We are taken away from that which is supposed to inspire us. And so we remain uninspired. We remain very amused, but we're not inspired. We're not moved to do something. We're not moved to internally reflect. We are amused and manipulated and controlled through that because of people, anybody who's beat down, slapped around constantly is going to look for some type of joy, some type of pleasure in their life. And if that joy and pleasure can be manipulated from the external, it's going to work by its nature to keep you amused, to keep you without your inspiration. Because the inspiration, the ingoing, the digging into your own mind is exactly what we have to do. And the lack of that is exactly what keeps them in power. We don't go into ourselves. We don't think about those things. We don't have honest conversations with ourselves because we'd rather not deal with that pain of being mused. We'd rather deal with the joy and the pleasure that comes from being amused. And that's a huge part of our problem. Again, racism, white supremacy dictates that we not do that. You know, we don't, back in the day, we used to talk about things like death. That's regular. Every other culture in the world talks about death, has very frank, you know, it's the one thing you cannot run from in this world, period. It's gonna happen. Yet we are so fearful of it. We've been taught to be afraid of it, so we don't want to talk about it. You being negative and all of this other nonsense that we don't want to talk about an inevitable situation and understand. So we bought in through racism and white supremacy. We bought into their concept. Again, racism, white supremacy, you understand, it's the imposition of their culture onto us, taking white folks' culture and forcing it onto us. They're scared of death because they don't believe in anything beyond that. They don't believe in anything that you can't taste, they don't appeal to the five senses. So anything that takes away from that, they have a problem with it. They don't like that. It scares them, it worries them. We believe in something beyond our five senses. And so it becomes a matter of fact. Yes, there's still some fear, some consternation behind it, but we have conversations because it's going to happen. Again, it's going to happen. So why not have that conversation and understand it and find some type of peace that you can have with that inevitability? But we don't do that because we want to be amused until it happens. And then we cry. And that's all we do. So again, all of these are expressions of racism, white supremacy, and how it works. These are just examples and, you know, places to begin conversations, whether it's religion or whether it's an amusement park. All of this shit is manipulated and controlled, not by you, not by us, not by our people. Ain't nobody in this country. Obama was the top CEO in this country. He is still a victim of racism, white supremacy. We're still in the same situation. But they will use that to say black folk have come a long way. Again, it's just another example of our oppression. And if you want to predict the future, like I like to predict the future, I don't want to predict it, but I like to see what's coming because it excites me. But if you look at somebody like, and I keep on saying his name, I'm gonna find somebody else that's doing, because it's gonna be some more. It's gonna be some more. That little guy, Lil RT, he's gonna be the future. He's the prototype for the future. He is that when you talk about conquering your people in conquering an enemy in the womb, that's an example of it. If you're 8 or 9 years old and you already have these thoughts of females, your sisters, as being these horrible things, that shit's only going to grow and it's going to manifest and it's going to spread like any virus. So that little dude and what's happening with him, that's your future. That's what's that's the next generation. I forgot, I had a conversation with a young person who was like 16 years old, and they were telling me what's the next, you know how they have the little names for like Gen Z and millennial and all of that? Mm-hmm. I think they said like Gen Alpha or something, some shit, because they got a name for it. I forget what the name is. But
I think
that,
I think they start back over on the alphabet.
Oh hell, whatever. But that generation, oh Lord, that generation, because was it Gen Z? All of them are just so fucked up. The next generation, that's going to be hell to pay. That's going to be the prime, to me, in my head, that's going to be the primal generation. That's the generation that's going to be living like cave people. Ooga booga, like nobody can fucking read. Nobody can, read a map or look at a map and see the pictures and know what the hell they're looking at. All of that just basic shit. Nobody can communicate. Nobody knows how to rear children. Nobody knows how to have a family. That shit, that generation, that shit is it. That's a wrap. You want to see how bad shit can get? Just look at it. Look at it, and then just multiply it. Imagine Lil RT, the way he's talking like he is now. Imagine him at 18, 16. Imagine him that age. The shit that those cats are going to be doing, saying, thinking, and feeling. That's a problem. That's a serious ass problem. And people not going to understand it. People not going to even want to address it because his beats was fly, nigga. Yo, I mean we're amused by him dancing around and saying the shit he says. So we're amused. So rather than muse about it and think about it, damn, this motherfucker is saying some fucked up shit. Maybe we should do an intervention and save this child. Save the next cat next to him. Save these other little. No, we like, oh, he sound good. Yo, that's that little RT type shit. Yo, he's gonna be the next RT. Some bullshit. But that's what we're going to fucking do. That's what we're gonna do. I hear people my age listening to some of this little young people music. Shit's crazy to me. It's crazy to me how we are still stuck in that mindset of dressing like we're 20, like we're, going to the club and doing those types of things. We are so stunted in our growth because of this shit. We can't even see it. And we buy into it. And we're amused and we roll with it. And it just feels good. So as long as it feels good, yeah, we're not gonna do it because liberation don't feel good. Liberation hurts. Liberation is a bitch. Let me tell you, because we ain't got there. And I know all three of us done had our pains behind this shit and we ain't did nothing. So imagine if we was really, you go to Haiti and see what that shit is really like. Go to the Congo and see what that shit is really like. Burkina Faso, Niger, that's revolution. Motherfuckers want to wear a ski mask and pull it down over their face and be cute and shit. Try that shit in one of them countries, motherfucker. As soon as you pull that shit down, you have about 30 guns pointed at the back of your head. Because motherfuckers don't, it's real shit over there. You don't wear fatigues unless you're about to murder some shit. Unless you're about to go to war, unless you are actually part of a militia who is fighting a government. That's what you wear that shit for. But us, we're amused by it. So we put that shit on, not realizing what it is we're saying to the world, not realizing how manipulated we are about the shit. And our egos at this point have been so deified, we ain't trying to hear that shit. I guarantee you, I guarantee you somebody gonna say some dumb shit about all of this show right here. This show. And we've done our best to explain, what it is, the thrust and all of this type of, but somebody's gonna say something and I guarantee they're amused. But that's okay. You be amused. I'll be a joker.
So it's gonna require one of y'all to give us a quick synopsis, a quick breakdown of what's going on for us to talk about it. But what do we think about the P. Diddy situation? And how does that apply, or does it even apply to white supremacy and racism in any way, form, or fashion? But that's the talk. That is the talk of the internet right now, P. Diddy and what's going on with him. And some are even saying that that's just something to distract us or to amuse, as Brother E said, because that's one of the things that they do. They love to keep us distracted. And that's an old strategy. You look at, I think one of y'all mentioned it before on a past show, but you can look at movies like Gladiator. The people in Rome were starving. They was hungry. And as a response, he didn't give out more food. He didn't create policies for the people. What he did was he opened the Colosseum and started the gladiator fights. And that would keep the people distracted from the real problems of what they was dealing with. by being able to go to the Coliseum and watch people murder each other. And that's no different than what we see today, how people are so caught up in football games, so caught up in the new diss that's going on between people like Drake and Kendrick Lamar and this and that, or what's going on in the news about P. Diddy. But could one of you brothers give us a quick synopsis about the P. Diddy situation, and does that apply? Does white supremacy and racism even apply to that?
Well, let me say this, and I'm not going to really give a breakdown of his situation at all. But what I'm going to say here is, I think the biggest reason this is such a hit on social media is folks can't get enough of drama and entertainment by looking at strange dysfunctional behavior that makes them feel better about their own dysfunctional lifestyle. So that ties directly into what is our appetite. Like when we talked about earlier, one of the things E keeps hitting on is, and we talked about, is these systems of oppression. I think one of the things that we have to realize is, okay, well, what are these systems? Within the Panther mechanism cycle structure, we refer to these systems as being institution, infrastructure, and architecture. That trifecta controls the perception of how everything else in terms of what a person defines. Then that goes into what we call our 3Ds, define, develop, and defend. What each person will define as their way of life, develop themselves in terms of what they become, and then defend that. Like when Sykes said that a slave will basically defend his own master to the point to where when the house burned down, the slave is going to give his life for that house. Why? Because he has defined himself as an inferior being that must survive, whose sake of survival is based upon his master's survival. You see, so when we've accepted that definition of inferiority, that's what happens. And then we develop our life behind that subjugation. And so when people get caught up into this drama cycle of wanting to even care about what some millionaire entertainer is about, is because we have allowed ourselves to be caught up in that concept of that muse, like we said earlier, of that entertainment. Regardless, again, of the dysfunctional behavior, it's the fact that people will glue themselves to the television, glue themselves to the situation, and just got to hear this gossip, got to hear what this dysfunctional behavior is, because it helps them to actually be able to not look at themselves in the mirror and address their own realities. Kind of like what E emphasizes when he talks about being able to sit still. Well, we have to look at it like this. Our ability to resonate with our own thoughts, or should I say our ability to not resonate with our own thoughts, is the reason why we can't sit still and we can't self-reflect. We can't self-reflect because we're so busy. We're so busy because we've allowed institution, infrastructure, and architecture of inferiority to set in to a point to where this has made us who we are. So then that affects what we call our 3Ds. It affects our perception, our pursuit, and then what we call preserve. And to wrap all that up goes into what we call our 3Rs, which is to restore, to renew, and reproduce. We can't restore anything because we've allowed ourselves to be defined by our victimization process. We can't perceive anything positive in terms of us being in charge of our own because we've allowed the structures and the definitions of empowerment to be defined through institution, infrastructure, and architecture by our enemy. And so we live our life through those. So then when we pursue anything, we're pursuing it from the position of being dominated, from the position of being victimized, from the position of being controlled by that very thing. So watching these quote unquote famous people with money live these lavish lifestyles goes into the fact that we live in a society that is overloaded on what I call luxury visual stimulation, causing a misregulation of dopamine, putting our mental health at an imbalance. And that's what's going on. So that imbalance continues to be self-perpetuating. And that self-perpetuating causes us to want and gravitate toward more of that sickness. And as we gravitate toward that sickness, there is nothing left to restore in terms of us as a people and as a lifestyle, which means we can't renew anything other than more self-defeating, self-hatred, and inferior lifestyles. And then that means we're going to just simply reproduce more of the same thing. So we have to realize how these trifactor systems operate. Either you're going to be on a incline or a decline from that standpoint. So all of these things are operating through epigenetic cycles. So once you put us in a position where we don't recognize who we are, because we can't self-reflect as a people, because we don't have the definition of what it means to be dealing with self-sufficiency or self-preservation and self-determination as a people, because we don't have these anymore, then what we're going to do is we're going to reproduce mental enslavement, operating through those three cycles of institution, infrastructure, and architecture. So when we talk about the P. Diddy situation, we're basically talking about the fact that our people are caught up in the watching and monitoring the lifestyle, the sick lifestyles of some of these quote unquote entertainers, knowing good and well that they've created chains and scenarios to where they want to make sure that their lifestyle is going to go off on this tangent of something that is non-productive and progressive for the whole. So that's that Luxor that is being portrayed and projected upon our people, that create these false images of progress that we continue to follow. That's my part on that.
And that's the real housewives of the revolution right there. It's all about the drama. Because and I agree with everything you said, but what pops out to my head most is the fact when this shit comes up, you got 1, 2, 5, 10, 30 motherfuckers say, oh yeah, I knew something was wrong. I knew Usher going to move in with this dude and going to, what was it, Lollipop Playhouse or some bullshit boot camp, staying with P. Diddy, and he took over the what do you call that? The parental rights for this dude and that little white boy, Justin Bieber. All of these people coming out and say, yeah, it was something wrong right there. But because we're amused by the money, we're amused by, oh, it's P. Diddy. We're amused by the shit. We don't pay attention. We don't trust that inner, it's this thing called the dark knowledge of God. And that's not like, it's what we think, agnosia, the word where agnostic comes from. Now agnostic means I don't know about God, I don't choose a religion, but where it came from was the word agnosia, that means that dark knowledge. And that don't mean nothing dark like, ooh, Jason Friday the 13th. That means that knowing that knowing about something without reading about something. That's some shit we excelled in. But because we've been taught not to trust that inner self, not to go into self and have those inner self conversations, we don't believe it unless it's on CNN. We don't believe it unless it's on the TV or some movie somewhere. We believe that shit, but we don't believe what we know. We know that motherfuckers doing that shit. I don't have no paper, no proof, no evidence, but I understand the industry. I understand, more importantly, I understand racism, white supremacy, and how it works. And if Epstein was doing that shit, making money like he was making, this nigga was doing that shit, making the money he was making. I don't give a shit. But my issue is all of those people stood around and watched this shit at black folk. Fuck it, white people supposed to do that shit. They supposed to get hyped off the fact that, niggas doing nigga shit. They're supposed to do. So, hats off to them. But we stood around, heard the reports, even when it took Cat Williams coming out finally for somebody to start halfway paying attention and saying exactly what because it's happened before. This is not the first time this shit has happened. Even again, we were talking about shit happening back in slave days. Yeah, it's going to be somebody that's in charge of trafficking the slaves. Those people, the ones who were in control of it, they wasn't us. But the ones who could get in, look like us, talk like us, like the music that we like, help to make the music that we like, said the right thing, had the right slang and everything. Those are the same people back then that was helping to traffic and go into our villages and our nations and pull us out of there and told massa how to work us and make us do right and da-da-da-da-da. Those are the same motherfuckers that P. Diddy would have been back then. Of course, he one of the ultimate house niggas. Of course he is. It only fucking makes sense. But again, P. Diddy ain't the problem. The problem is that we stood around, look at this shit, and continue. R. Kelly, this motherfucker, he did the shit. He's peeing on little girls and all that shit, but we still believe that we can fly. That bullshit. We still support that shit. So again, I ain't talking about white people. The guys that wrote that shit in the comments and shit. I ain't talking about white people. I'm talking to you, because I guarantee you, probably both of y'all like R. Kelly and P. Diddy will continue to support the bullshit that they've been doing. That's your money that helped to enslave them folks. That helped to ship little girls that's disappearing off the street and go be sold to some Arab motherfucker somewhere is using her as a slave or some shit. You did that, not white people. You did that shit. Quit buying his shit. That's why I say it don't matter to me how you make your money. You can be a dope dealer or a CEO. I gives a fuck. How are you spending your money? You still trying to consume your way into freedom? You still trying to buy your way into this man's house? It ain't never gonna happen. Instead of spending all your money on some shit that's already put together, spend your money on things that empower you. Shit you can build with. Go to Home Depot and buy a fucking drill. Be a man. Don't call somebody or take your shit to the shop to fix something that you could do your damn self. You want to defund the police? Quit spending your money with them. That's where their funding comes from. You keep paying them motherfuckers to fuck you over because you're amused by what they do. So R. Kelly's of the world and P. Diddy's of the world, these motherfuckers can keep on being the Pied Piper. Oh, better read the story about what the Pied Piper actually is, because R. Kelly told you, but you didn't know what the fuck the Pied Piper is. Hell, you thought it was just some little white boy in a suit, doing all of that shit, leading all the snakes and shit out of a area, whatever the hell animal it was he did. He's telling you the actual story of the Pied Piper. He's leading your little girls, Aaliyah, Justin Bieber, Usher, all of them, leading them right into the world that they want them to be in, so they can continue to manipulate and control your amused ass. But we love that amusement. We are so amused with it. Psych brought up football. It's motherfuckers that will shoot you if you say the Dallas Cowboys ain't shit. That will get you a fight. Now, I know both of y'all have seen it coming out of Dallas and Fort Worth. We done seen motherfuckers get into fist fights because of some damn football game. You don't have no stock in the team. You ain't got nothing to do with them except you gave them money to advertise by wearing one of their jerseys. How crazy is that? You're so amused that you're paying them to do something that they pay other motherfuckers to do. You advertising for them, but you're amused by it. So you give your money away rather than building something for yourself and being a man and putting things together. Go work on your own car. Quit buying all that shit. So yeah, the issue is not even P. Diddy. He's just like you said, he's a distraction. What it is he represents and what it is we continue to turn a blind eye to because it's easier, because it sounds better, it looks good. All of that shit. That's the problem. Problem ain't white people. Like Mr. Farrakhan said, problem ain't white people. The problem is our inordinate fear of white people. The problem is that we've accepted their bullshit and we think it's righteous. We think it's cool. We go to church just like them, say amen, hallelujah, and then Monday morning go right back working in jobs that we make excuses for, that we know are fucking people over, but we still roll along with it because we're amused by all of these things that are around us and we continue to buy into their value system, their culture, their way of life. And none of that shit is going to change. Fuck P. Diddy. He's just another, time is up. Time is up. Suge Knight said it. He did. I don't know how this motherfucker, all them charges he got, how he get to have a podcast in jail, but Sight couldn't have a podcast in jail. I'm kind of irritated by that. I don't appreciate that. But Suge Knight said it himself, told Diddy, man, your life in danger, dog. And that's somebody who's been there, who knows exactly how the game goes, he's seen the little rooms in the back of this dude's house that people talk about and whatnot. So he's letting them know your time is up. They finna you're outed now. They know about you. So P. Diddy finna have some real problems. Might not even be, he might hang himself in a jail cell. Who knows? But yeah, he's a distraction. The whole situation is a distraction so that we will be amused and not think about what's actually going on. We are the problem. Y'all absolutely right. Stop talking about white people. Let's talk about white people in your head, because that's where the problem is. The white people that are in your head that you refuse to recognize. As long as you refuse to recognize them, there'll be another P. Diddy. You'll be singing his songs, and when he get outed and everything, you'll say, oh, well, and go find another one to do the exact same shit all over again. Game resets, and y'all still doing this shit. It's crazy to me. I am not amused.
Well, real quick, I want to say when you talked about the whole Pied Piper thing, just want to throw something out there for the listening audience to look into. The whole thing, to where that ties into from a musical two-step concept. And this is funny to me because when I used to bounce at do club security and I bounce, I used to listen for this particular type of beat and groove pattern because I noticed how it is naturally hypnotic in terms of this new musical synchronization of a simple back and forth pattern. Boom, da, boom, da. That pattern right there is very hypnotic. From that stance, it allows a musical gatekeeper, which is what we're talking about. All it is, that's all we're talking about, musical gatekeeper. When you create a musical gatekeeper pattern, then the people ignore the message. They ignore what actually is being placed on top of that, what's called a carrier frequency or carrier signal, which is how you're able to create a musical Trojan horse to where anybody will follow along as long as they like that beat. That beat is that Pied Piper concept, and that Pied Piper concept is created by these folks that they put in positions, which are gatekeepers, to control the flow of anything that has to do with any semblance of power. So the whole point is to keep you stuck on and looking at the gatekeepers and for them to allow and control the narrative. And that's what we don't recognize. So when we talk about gatekeeping, it has to do with physical, mental, and spiritual enslavement and the control and the regulation of such. So the whole point is to that even flows into the concept when we talk about counterintelligence programs or counterintelligence tactics. You're countering the intelligence of the society, and you're also doing what's also referred to as counter-consciousness, because these gatekeeping hypnotic beats that applied through these gatekeeping people are able to hypnotize you to simple-minded thinking and simple-minded knowledge or simple-minded operations. And as long as our music continues to be that used as that gatekeeping concept, we keep falling for the overdose. So that lifestyle that P. Diddy is living is something people luster for. And they don't see that that's a trap. They don't see that they've been mentally, physically, and psychologically gatekept away from anything that will create collective empowerment, which goes back to what he said when he talked about having direct knowledge. Direct knowledge meaning that we're able to automatically come into a certain awareness of consciousness. But as long as a weapon has been deployed against the people to create counterintelligence, counter-consciousness, then this goes full circle back to what Sype talked about when we first opened up the show and said that we have to raise the consciousness of our people. So that's why we keep hitting some of these same stuff, these same concepts, because we have to say it in just a different way to try to turn on that consciousness again. Get us to recognize that our appetites have been destroyed. Our appetites have been altered to where what we find appealing is this madness and this nonsense. So right now, the insane is the same. The insane is the new sane. And we don't seem to realize that that is what we're doing to ourselves. So it's a matter of trying to poke and prod at the right thing to wake folks up. And I'm done.
And you can apply the same idea to gatekeeper. We were talking about earlier about the evangelicals and all of that. They're the gatekeepers. They know, they get tutelage, the really big ones get tutelage about what's going on. But if you try to have a conversation about, well, the Bible says Jesus was black, why are these pictures of this white boy you calling Jesus? They, at the very most, yeah, we should da-da-da, and that's it. It doesn't lead you to further question the rest of the reality that's presented to you into in that particular system, in that particular field, that being religion. It's the same game. They're gatekeepers that are used to manage our expectations, to manage what it is we learn, we think we know. I mean, think about it. You got 40, 50-year-old people talking about their God-fearing Fear is supposed to be the beginning of wisdom. The fucking beginning. If you've been in the church for 30 years and you're still at the beginning, there's a problem. There's something going on. You haven't gotten past the beginning of wisdom. You're still stuck there because your gatekeeper has managed it and made it so. Will not let you break out of that box because we put way too much this Messiah shit that they got us buying into more and more. It's an innate part of humanity, but it's exacerbated and manipulated in this system. That part of our psyche is brought to the fore and manipulated so that we're either following T.D. Jakes, we're following P. Diddy, we're following LeBron James, we're following some individual that is telling us what to do, even though we know that shit is fucked up. If they lied to you about what Jesus looks like, what the hell else did they lie to you about your religion, about your relationship with God? We don't keep following those dots because we're not allowed to go into our own minds and believe and accept. We're told, oh, that's mysticism. We're told, don't question God. We're told all of this nonsense to keep us from having those conversations with the one person, the one group of people that we should be having those conversations with. So again, P. Diddy ain't the first. P. Diddy ain't the last. He comes from a long line of slave catchers and salesmen and whatever else that continue to manage our physical as well as our mental. So yeah, I mean, this is what that is. That's just the way it is, and it's going to continue to be that way until we stop allowing ourselves to be sucked up, entertained. Remember, entertain is like obtain, retain. Tain means to hold on to. So if you entertain, something is being entered into and then held. Your mind, if you're entertained, you're sitting in front of a movie, it's entering into your mind and holding you at a certain orbit, holding you at a certain spot and will not let you grow beyond it. And that's what we enjoy. That's what we like because it feels good to us physically, but it does nothing but rot our minds. And again, I'm going to keep on saying it. I want to watch the dude grow up. I hope he has another 47 hits so I can keep track of him on YouTube. I want to see Little RT and how he put it down in the next few years. I want to see who comes up behind him, who's going to be on a record label with this cat. Is he going to be the new P. Diddy? He might be. He's already gained enough popularity. He's on that track. He might be the one. So yeah, it's absolutely insane. We let this shit continue to happen.